Zionism. Zionism has become, arguably, the most politically charged term on planet Earth today. And the progressives equate it with everything bad on planet Earth: neocolonialism, racism, oppression. All bad things start and end with Zionism. But how many people actually know what the term means? Well, let's look at that for a second. The term Zionism, let's start with Zion. In Hebrew, it's called Zion. And anybody with Bible, whether they go to synagogue or church or mosque, knows that in Jerusalem, there is a mountain, really a small hill, that is called Zion. And that mountain became synonymous with Jerusalem when Jerusalem became the capital of Judea and the land of Israel. King David ruled from Jerusalem. King Solomon built a temple on Mount Zion, and that temple, two temples there were, first temple and then second temple, stood there for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. It became the center of God worship, monotheism in the world. Alexander the Great went there. Jesus went there and cried when he foresaw its destruction. And it continued to be holy to this day. It's arguably the most disputed and at the same time revered piece of real estate on planet Earth. The little piece of territory on top of Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and Zion became synonymous with Jerusalem and with the land of Israel. So, the Jewish people have a connection with the land of Israel that goes back 3,700 years when Abraham leaves what is today Iraq and goes to Canaan, Israel. And then Moses leads the Exodus, let my people go, to the promised land some 3,500 years ago. Joshua fights with Canaanites and establishes a Jewish state in the land of Israel, in the Holy Land. And there have been over the history 4 Jewish states there, never any other state. No Palestinian state, no other state. The only independent states in that area have been Judea, Judah, ancient Israel, and modern Israel. Now, 2,000 years ago, the Romans, colonial empire, crushed the Jews. The Jews fought for freedom. They could not stand the idea that a pagan empire would rule a monotheistic, God-fearing country. They fought, and they fought, and they fought. And after some 4 revolutions, they were crushed and dispersed. Their country was renamed Palestine by the Romans. It became a province in various empires that were ruled by colonialists from far away. First pagan Romans, then the Byzantine Christian Romans, then the Crusaders, then the Arabs who arrived from Arabia, then the Ottoman Muslims from Turkey, then the British. Empire after empire ruled that area from far away and oppressed the local people. Truth is, there were not many local people. As late as the late 1800s, Mark Twain, one of the most famous writers in history, the beginning of American humor, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, he wrote a travel log from Palestine. Innocents Abroad, it's called. It was his most best-selling book. And he wasn't Jewish, he wasn't Zionist, he wasn't anything. There was no modern Zionism. What he said is that it's desolate and heartbreaking. There have been 3,000 travelers in the 1800s went to the Holy Land on pilgrimage. They describe it as desolate, a desert, dangerous. Now, what happens? For 2,000 years, the Jews daily pray for a return to Zion. It becomes a religious aspiration. God, lead us back to our country of origin, where we were free, indigenous, self-governing, and worshiping you. And during those 2,000 years, some Jews go back. Most of the Jews are living all over the world, being oppressed. At some point, it becomes intolerable for the Jews. Just before World War I, 100,000 Jews are massacred in Ukraine alone. So An Austrian journalist by the name of Theodor Herzl in 1897, not that long ago, just over 100 years ago, calls a meeting, the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. And what does he say? He basically says to a bunch of students, really, let's turn a religious aspiration, a spiritual aspiration, into a political program. Let's add ism to Zion, because the ism makes it an ideology. Liberalism, communism. Ism turns it into an ideology. And what does this ideology stand for? Jewish empowerment. Let's not be victims anymore. Let's go home. That's Zionism. And anyone who calls him or herself a Zionist today, that's what they stand for. Now, how did the world react to this Zionist Congress? The world reacted that it's crazy, that a bunch of Jews in Switzerland would gather together with no country, with no guns, with no power, that they would rent suits for the group picture so that they look good, that these people were going to go and fight and establish a state which was then ruled from Turkey by the Ottoman Muslim Empire. Ridiculous. But guess what? Within like 51 years, modern state of Israel was born. And it was an inspiration to liberation movements all over the world. It wasn't racist. It was perceived as anti-racist. African movements of liberation started. The beginning of the end of the British Empire, colonial empire, started with the Jews in Palestine kicking the British out and establishing a Jewish state. Who were Zionists? Rosa Parks was a Zionist. Bayard Rustin was a Zionist. Martin Luther King was a Zionist. Marcus Garvey started a group called the Black Zionists to say, hey, let's empower ourselves in America. Let's go back to Africa. Let's be powerful and proud like the Jews. Who were on the other side? Well, one of the founders of the Black Panther movement in the United States, Eldridge Cleaver, who wrote that famous book, Soul on Ice, he ran away from American justice. And he was a free man in Algeria. And then he came back to the United States and turned himself in, and he wrote a famous statement from a California prison. Because people asked him, why do you prefer to be in jail in America to free in an Arab state? And he answered, I quote, Arabs are the biggest racists in the world. Eldridge Cleaver, not me. They have a cultural problem, not the Zionists. The Zionists are the anti-racists. I mean, this is Eldridge Cleaver. The Zionists fought in the British Army, in the Jewish Brigade in World War II, against the fascists, against the Nazis, against Hitler. Who was the leader of Arab nationalism in Jerusalem during the Second World War? Haj Amin al-Husseini. Where was he during the war? He was in Berlin, rooting for Hitler, telling him to kill all the Jews, not just those in Palestine, all of them, all over the world. I mean, unfortunately, these are the people that the Zionists are still fighting. Hamas, anti-gay, anti-women, anti-West, anti-democracy. The Arab world has slavery today. Check it out. Black slaves in the Arab world today. The great financier of Al Jazeera and Hamas and so on is Qatar. Qatar, under Western pressure, only outlawed slavery in 1952. There was no civil war. They didn't liberate in the 1800s. 1952, the Arab world, after trafficking in slaves, some 12 million slaves, for hundreds of years, they still had slavery, and they still have slavery today in places like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia, like Sudan. So in a bizarre flip of reality, the anti-racists are called racist. The slave owners are called liberation movements. How did that happen? It's simple. The people who are against the Jews hate the Jews more than they love freedom, more than they love equality. Historically speaking, there's two movements fighting it out in the Middle East. One movement, pro-slavery, pro-racism, anti-gay, anti-woman, pro-terror, against democracy, against liberalism, against nationhood. They want an Islamic republic all over the world, against nationalism, right? Against statehood. The other movement, against imperialism, against colonialism, against racism, for democracy, for freedom. That movement is called Zionism. Choose a side.